are in the halftime adjacent area here of the early games in week 12. Thanks everyone for hanging out. The chat room is open for you to hit us with all of your thoughts. Any late, start-sit questions. I know we've got some pretty good primetime games coming up, minus the fact that we are going to have to watch the Bears again. But let's stay positive here, because I thought we were going to have to open this show, Liz, as we usually do, talking about a major injury, as I saw Josh Allen get his ankle all twisted up and Matt Barkley strolling onto the field after Joey Bosa put the hurt on Josh Allen during a little improvisational play from number 17 there for the Buffalo Bills. But Allen gets back on the field. I don't think we have any other major maladies to discuss, if I'm correct.
No, I think we have the result of injuries that we already knew about, or COVID restrictions that we already knew about. For instance, Justin Jefferson seeing the end zone quite a bit with Adam Thielen not present. Evan Ingram did get banged out for a second, and then he returned, but he's always banged up a little bit, but he did leave for a second. I believe he returned against the Bengals. A great matchup for Ingram, by the way. He was, I'm sure, a regularly started DFS play this week.
Yeah, it definitely was a good matchup against the Bengals. He might actually, because he did have I think he had a long catch and run or whatever, so he might actually have more than his usual 6 catches for 55-yard stat line that he's had here in 2020. But I'll begin the show here, Liz, asking you, what's got you tilted so far? Scott Parker from our Twitter chat room asks, is Diggs playing? He's got a big donut so far in the stat line, what was supposed to be big shootout there. That kind of has sort of come to fruition. There's some decent fantasy pointage, 17 points from the Buffalo Bills there, but a little gadgety touchdown. I will definitely say I'm a little tilted by this Stephon Diggs no-show so far. Did draw a pass interference on one of the earlier drives that resulted in a Dawson Knox touchdown, but as we know, those don't count in your fantasy box score.
No, I don't think I'm particularly tilted by anything. You can be disappointed by Kenyon Drake not able to cross the goal line, but also, it's not December yet, so that's not too surprising. Meanwhile, Derrick Henry has 3 touchdowns on the day. Darius Leonard doesn't manage to tackle him. That was a little bit tilting, but also nothing that we can't imagine occurring. I think an interesting moment, if we're talking paradoxically about young quarterbacks, is seeing Baker Mayfield throw off his back foot and overthrow Rashad Higgins, who was wide open in the end zone. And meanwhile, Kyler Murray, just a couple of minutes later, does the exact damn thing and connects. So, I think that if we're looking at comparisons or narratives, those are a couple that are bubbling up.
Yeah, definitely. It's always interesting to compare those two guys. Obviously, back-to-back first overall picks, back-to-back starters at Oklahoma, and the gap between their resumes, it's a pretty narrow gap. The gap between who I'd rather have as being, my quarterback for the next 10 years, the next 10 seconds, that's a pretty wide gap between Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. I don't know if that analogy hit, but I'll tell you what did hit. You mentioned it already, Derrick Henry. Liz, during what I'll call the ham-picking phase of the Thanksgiving celebration in my house here, I'm looking at the screen. I could see Antonio Gibson putting up 3 touchdowns against the Dallas Cowboys. And I think to myself, well, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for anybody to top that performance here in week 12 at the running back position. Well, Derrick Henry didn't even need 60 minutes of game time to pretty much get there. Going into right around halftime right now, Derrick Henry, 17 carries, 140 yards, 3 touchdowns. Again, matching that 3 touchdown total from one Antonio Gibson. We know Derrick Henry's a baller. It's getting towards December. That is Derrick Henry season. That month of the year is always when Henry dominates. And we can already tell there's some guys out there on the Colts that are like, I don't want any part of that. Don't want to tackle him. Darius Leonard gave it the old college try, didn't work out. Tank mentioned this on the show. I think it was Tank a few times mentioned DeForest Buckner being out as potentially a pretty big difference maker for Henry's outlook. Looks like it was that and more some here in week 12.
Yeah, I believe it was Buckner that managed the strip sack on a couple of weeks ago. That was like a game winner for the Colts. And if you look back, really changed the momentum for the Colts. I think this matchup is fascinating, not so much from a fantasy perspective, but from a real-life football perspective, to see the incorporation, what Reich is doing with Brissett, because as the broadcasting crew noted, you don't want Phillip Rivers a la Drew Brees, right, despite the fact that they're similarly aged, to sneak in a quarterback draw. Like, I think that's kind of fascinating. I don't know. I'm enjoying watching this matchup from a real-life strategic point of view, but no real surprises. As you mentioned, it's almost Derrick Henry's season, and Nyheim Hines is leading the backfield, not by a ton of touches, because obviously game flow isn't leading in his direction from a rushing standpoint, though he is already caught 5 balls in the passing game. Michael Pittman is second in team targets, tied with Trey Burton. So I think there's a lot of interesting real life football implications as we're moving towards the postseason. I think if we're looking at, I'm also fascinated by the I don't know why I shouldn't be this fascinated, which is, I think, speaks to like the larger Week 12 issues, plural, but the Miami at Jets game to me is absolutely fascinating. I love Ryan Fitzpatrick this week, but he's only managed to connect for 1 passing score so far. It was Mike Gesicki. There was a controversial no call that went Devonta Parker's way. And then it's also interesting to see what Sam Darnold is doing under center. Denzel Mims continues, and I wasn't sure what the rapport there would be with Mims because he is a rookie and he missed a bunch of time at the start of the season, but he is leading that receiving core in targets. So that's a player that I'm monitoring, maybe not for 2020, but definitely moving forward, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of turnover, I guess you could say, in New York here.
I would say so. I would say there might be some turnover in New York. As we're talking, Derrick Henry looked like he might have, was going to punch in his 4th touchdown, but oh no, Ryan Tannehill keeps it on the option, and literally the entire Colts defense looked like it went right for Derrick Henry. Tannehill just wanders in untouched. That's another point on this Titans game too. The guy who got them down there was actually Corey Davis on a long catch. I was surprised to see how many people were actually questioning, like, do I start A.J. Brown this week? There was a lot of people in the chat room during FFL talking about A.J. Brown. The answer to start A.J. Brown is yes, but Corey Davis is actually a top 30 wide receiver in points per game this year. Like, I feel like people have not given it enough credit that Davis is also having like a breakout season here in his contract year. Really could be a value as a, he's never going to be the top 5 pick, right? That he was drafted to be. But I think he's a solid like starting number 2 receiver, and I think he kind of always has been that guy. Liz, you have a question specifically for you in the chat room. Alfred from Facebook just says, #AskFFL. Liz, no me. I'm not, so I won't be answering because it was not addressed to me, only you. Liz, do you like Robert Woods better than Deontay Johnson in a dangerously scheduled game here on Tuesday? Alfred from Facebook needs to know.
That is very interesting, because on the podcast with Andy, I went and hyped up Robert Woods because I feel like Cooper Kupp gets all of this shine, when in fact Robert Woods, if we're again talking from a real football perspective, is 1,000 times more versatile outside slot, used as a blocker, touches out of the backfield, and I feel like Robert Woods isn't getting the pub that he deserves. But also in this matchup against San Francisco, Richard Sherman is back. I don't know how I like that for Robert Woods. Sherman isn't someone who necessarily travels that much. But then we look at this conundrum that we have potentially on Tuesday, and I think I still have to. In Sherman's first game back, maybe there's a little bit of rust. It's obviously not being played at home. Probably won't be for the rest of the year. But I would say I still am probably going to play it safe and give Robert Woods the edge. And Matt, even though you weren't asked, I am asking you, in a situation like that, would you still lean cautiously away from the Tuesday, again, potential Tuesday matchup?
Yeah, I feel like the only guys I would actually be okay with starting in this situation would be Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. Like, I think those guys are the only ones in this game that are worth the risk of taking the 0 if you need sort of a higher ceiling. But Woods, as you mentioned, safe enough that I feel like I don't have to risk that. Like, I think I can be okay, with this situation and going with a guy like Robert Woods with a pretty safe target projection and just feeling okay with that.
Right. I think that's a really good point, though. We should say that, because I think what you mentioned there, the nuance there of like safe enough, like who I agree that it's Claypool or Johnson that I'm going to maybe be tempted by, but over like Russell Gage, who's playing right now, but like over one of those, would I, wouldn't I situations versus a regular weekly start.
Totally right. Like a pretty normal, safe, like wide receiver 2. I'm in on not taking the risk there. But yeah, Russell Gage, someone in that range, totally agree. Jeff Davis actually asks about a wide receiver sort of that I think is in that range here. Jeff Davis from Facebook has the sneezing emoji and the vomit emoji and the what is that thing called? The thermometer emoji. So very appropriate here for 2020 to ask the question. Please help. Travis Fulgham or Latavius Murray in the flex? There's a little bit of shine on Fulgham because of the matchup. We know against the Seahawks, that's gorgeous, but a lot of questions about that Eagles offense in general. And I actually think Latavius Murray could be, a sneaky bet for 15 plus carries here. Like, that's a pretty conservative mark in an offense that should be run heavy in New Orleans. Which one of those two do you think are the more preferable option this week?
I mean, this is the old fantasy expert scapegoat of floor versus ceiling, right? Which do you feel like messing with? If you're chasing points, then you've got to give it to Fulgham. I'm not sure how much we're going to see Carson Wentz, but again, when you look at the over-under and you look at the matchup against Seattle and how many passing yards they're giving away per week, then that becomes interesting. But again, I just don't know. You have said brilliantly before, fantasy football is all about tolerance. What can you tolerate? And if you can tolerate Travis Fulgham starting him and, potentially putting up 3 points while Latavius Murray gives you like 7, then go ahead and do that. But no, it's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, you have the benefit here of both of these games being later, right? Like, I mean, obviously the Saints-Broncos game is going to kick off in the next window here, but still, like, decide, Jeff.
How you doing?
How far, how are you doing, man? Like, do you think you're going to need that big hammer of a ceiling that Fulgham maybe could provide? But also, let's remember, like, we might see some Jalen Hurts in this game, and, like, maybe that's an upgrade for the Eagles offense, but maybe it just changes their game plan completely. So there's a lot of questions there. I agree with Liz that, like, if you just need the safe, reliable 7 to 12 points, your best bet is probably Murray. If you're behind and, again, you get to see that here. You're able to tell, like, how far ahead am I? How far behind am I? Then maybe you go with Fulgham if you need that hammer there. There's a lot of people in the chat room buzzing about Teddy Bridgewater and how he's terrible. That's a little aggressive, but he did miss. We talked about what's tilting up top. I had the whole segment today about the Panthers wide receivers and, like, don't bother picking between them because, like, don't bother debating because you gotta play them all. Well, in daily fantasy, I did play and pick DJ Moore over Robbie Anderson in our Guru Challenge lineup. Whoops, because DJ Moore, Teddy Bridgewater, this is probably what's got people upset. He missed him by just a bit. Overthrew him, actually. We think about Teddy Bridgewater and his pop gun arm. He was overthrown, was DJ Moore, by Teddy Bridgewater. But Robbie Anderson, I feel like they've been trying to hit him on this, like, shallow crossing route over the middle of the field for a touchdown all year. It finally happens. Robbie Anderson scores from his first touchdown in literally forever. But
since week
the entire Panthers offense... Yeah, since week 1. I mean, literally. That is forever in the portion of 2020. That's forever. So yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Not great if you have DJ Moore, but Bridgewater has looked a little bit more flummoxed than I expected, coming off an injury against this Vikings defense that hasn't been very good all year.
I mean, and you want to talk about some ghosts coming back from a knee injury, admittedly, thankfully, the other knee, and facing his old team. Like, there might be a little bit of going on in his tummy here, given this matchup. And I have to say, Matt, I advocated for DJ Moore over Robbie Anderson in the fantasy face-off with Andy Behrens, but we both got the process right because it was DJ Moore who was missed on the deep look, which is why we were advocating for him and that ceiling. And Robbie Anderson, who you mentioned, scored, yes, the first time since week 1, but on a short yardage gain.
The process. It is with that note we will take it home for now. We appreciate you all hanging out with us here in the halftime portion. Should be a fun rest of the day. Is going to get interesting with that Denver New Orleans game. You all know why. I don't know if anyone out there is playing Kendall, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. It's going to be a weird, wild ride. But we got some good primetime games to look forward to. We got some interesting primetime games to look forward to. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out. Good luck with your fake teams the rest of the way. We'll talk to you later.